Test 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Test 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm turning this off for 1 second. Okay, does this sound good? Okay. Still okay? Still okay? Okay. Hey, Manny, I just did it, but I don't think I did it the right. I'm turning this off. Off one more time. One, two, three, four, five, six.
Yes, ma'am. You doing okay? Yeah. Yeah. How you been, man? How about Thank you, man. Everybody all set? We get the Jen LeBron approval?
Okay. Oh, there we go. I knew something didn't feel right. Adrian, I'm glad you made it. Good. All right, everyone all set? You guys get set all ready? Fantastic. Let's get to business. I know your time is valuable. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mayor Todd Gloria. I'm pleased to be here today with a number of our city's leaders, starting with our council president, Dr. Jennifer Campbell, the chair of our budget committee, Councilmember Chris Cate, our chief operating officer, Jay Goldstone, our chief financial officer, Matt Vespi, our Department of Finance director, Rolando Charvel. Why did I get that wrong? Sorry. It's the vaccine. I'm kidding. It's not the vaccine. I'm fine. Get your vaccine if you haven't already. Our Department of Finance Assistant Director, Adrian Del Rio, my Director of Policy, Jessica Lawrence, and especially Juan Pablo and Daniela Sanchez, the owners of Super Cocina, who has graciously hosted us today. So today we are at Super Cocina here in beautiful City Heights. This is a restaurant that has been a pillar of this community since the Sanchez family opened it back in the 1980s. But like so many local restaurants, it has found itself on the brink of closure due to the pandemic. As COVID-19 ravished the City Heights neighborhood, people lost their jobs and business slowed, so Juan Pablo and Daniela had to weigh their options on how best to save their family business. It was the city of San Diego that provided relief in the form of a small business grant that enabled Super Cocina to stay afloat. Juan Pablo and his family are some of the fortunate restaurant owners. And while the city is doing all that it can to support San Diegans, there is so much more that must be done. And so we are here today to release the fiscal year 2022 budget, a balanced plan that will get our city back on track. My Back to Work SD budget prioritizes an equitable recovery from the impacts of the pandemic while setting a foundation for a brighter future for all of us. Despite inheriting a structural budget deficit from the last administration, we have taken a pragmatic approach to balancing this budget. It's the first step in a 5-year plan to fully address the structural budget deficit at the City of San Diego. And it was important to me, despite our economic challenges, that we protected core services and invested in our city's greatest asset, our people. People like Juan Pablo and Daniela. The Back to Work SD budget invests in workers, minimizes service level reductions, and harnesses savings from operational efficiencies. And it centers on 6 key areas that I'd like to share with you: getting San Diegans back to work, protecting core services and jobs through fiscal responsibility, making major investments in combating homelessness, reimagining policing and public safety, equipping San Diegans of all ages for a brighter future, and tackling the existential threat of climate change. This builds off the Back to Work SD plan that I developed during my campaign and serves as a framework designed to help San Diegans who have been devastated by COVID-19. Some of the key investments I'd like to highlight are $10 million. Let me say that one more time. City charm. Some of the key investments I'd like to highlight are $10 million to provide nonprofits and small businesses with loans in some of our hardest hit communities, $750,000 to expand and grow small business enhancement program to include microgrants, an additional $750,000 investment in the Connected Careers workforce development program that employs local youth, and the creation of a concierge team at the city who helps small business owners navigate the complex world of permitting and licensing so they can get back to work as quickly as possible. These investments will strengthen our local businesses and provide stability for our local workforce. As one of the region's largest employers, we are choosing to invest in our city workforce as well, adjusting our workforce to increase efficiency. We're going to be investing in their salaries to make them more competitive with our peer agencies so that we can retain the talented public servants that make our city work. We have streamlined and reorganized the city's executive team in order to save over $780,000 annually. And we're adding 2 fire academies to ensure that our fire rescue department has the personnel that they need to keep us safe. We are changing the way that we approach road repair from simply calculating how many miles of cul-de-sacs we improve to making a more equitable and lasting approach on major thoroughfares in some of our more underserved communities. I'm also setting aside $10 million to create sexy streets in the historically underserved communities, communities that frankly have not seen their fair share of repairs over the many, many years. To be clear, we're focusing on quality road repair, complete with sidewalks, bike lanes, stormwater improvements, and better connections for public transit. This budget also tackles the issue that I hear the most about from San Diegans and is a top priority for me: homelessness. With the assistance of nationally renowned expert Matthew Doherty, we are completely revamping our Homelessness Services Office into a Homelessness Services Department. This department will provide the expertise and resources we need to achieve the long-term goal of ending chronic homelessness in San Diego. And these structural changes are designed to truly set us up for success in achieving that goal. It will give the city the everyday focus needed to better pursue a housing-first approach and hold accountable our service providers, something that has been missing from past administrations. We're also investing over $10 million to provide immediate actions that will serve those in crisis on our streets today. This will support my outreach-focused approach that aims to have social workers and behavioral health specialists be the first point of contact instead of our police officers. Many of our officers have done an admirable job of trying to address this issue with compassion and with care, but we know that social workers are the more appropriate and trained response, and this budget reflects that. This budget also makes across-the-board reductions to the police department's overtime, which will save more than $4 million annually. These savings are going to be immediately funneled into community and youth-focused programs, including the No Shots Fired program focused on gang prevention and diversion. We'll also put those savings into implementing our new independent commission on police practices. The commission will hold bad actors accountable and provide the public with increased transparency on police disciplinary actions. And by working closely with the police department, we are reimagining policing in San Diego to focus more on stopping crime before it starts. That begins with having programs that help youth get off our streets and take advantage of the educational and opportunities of our city. My proposed budget will provide the funding to create a new Summer for All of Us program that will help children and their families take part in activities at parks and libraries throughout our city. The pandemic has made it clearer than ever that access to technology and the internet is crucial. And that's why we're expanding our SD Access for All initiative that aims at increasing internet and technology access by having items like laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots available for those in communities of concern. And this will give folks who can't afford their own computers or internet access a way to get connected, to look for jobs, or take classes online. We'll reopen libraries soon on a Tuesday through Saturday schedule to save nearly $7 million and reinvest $1 million of those dollars into electronic and other virtual library hours. Moving from books to ebooks is emblematic of the advances that we are making throughout the city, and it is especially true when it comes to climate change. This year, we'll be making updates to our city's climate action plan and developing the city's first ever mobility action plan. The mobility action plan will give us a blueprint for how we can better use a variety of transportation types, including biking and shared devices like scooters. We'll also be investing $5 million into the new Climate Equity Fund so that we can prioritize projects in our underserved communities. In closing, I'm proud to introduce this budget today. Amid years of the city sustaining a structural deficit, this budget puts us on a path to fix that. Amid a potentially subsiding pandemic that has devastated our local economy, our attention is now turning toward recovery, and this budget invests in that. Amid decades of historic lack of investment in infrastructure, services for young people, and residents in communities like City Heights, this budget begins to change that. This budget lays the foundation to get San Diego back to work and back on track. And to tell you more about that, I'd like to turn it over to the chair of our budget committee, Councilmember Chris Cate. Councilmember?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic truly changed how we live, work, and function as San Diegans. Closets and bathrooms became home offices, and community rec centers and libraries were transformed into temporary testing and vaccination sites. Last year, I was chair of our Economic Development Committee, and as a former small business owner, I personally know how very hard 2020 was for our small business community. I applaud Mr. Sanchez and the thousands of other small business owners for utilizing city programs and resources, and surviving. We are now embarking on budget season. This is the time to hear from city residents and determine what are the core city services all San Diegans rely upon each and every day. From keeping our neighborhoods safe, keeping our parks and libraries open, or paving our streets, these are the basic city services that deserve funding. Every dollar not spent on these core city services will impact those basic services relied upon by our communities and provided by our city employees. I have always been transparent with the residents in my district regarding the city's finances, and as budget chair, I plan to do the same citywide. I encourage all city residents to take part in the budget process, which begins on May 5th, either by watching our hearings or taking part in the budget town halls my colleagues and I will be hosting in the coming weeks. I look forward to working with everyone to build a budget that will be reflective of all San Diegans. And now I'd like to introduce our Chief Operating Officer, Jay Goldstone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Gloria, Council President Campbell, and Councilmember Kate. The mayor has provided an overview of the spending plan for the city. When you see the actual budget document, it's a $4.6 billion budget. That's for the entire city. $1.7 billion of that is the general fund. Those are the kinds of programs the mayor is talking about. The general fund is what funds our police, our fire, our park and rec, libraries, and so forth. What I want to do is take a few minutes just to talk about how we arrived and how we're going to pay for that $1.7 billion budget. Before I do that, though, I want to mention that while this is a one-year budget, the mayor has taken a long-term view when deciding how to develop the budget. You may be aware that annually the city prepares a 5-year financial outlook, which serves as a guiding light for the budget preparation process. But unlike the past several years, every decision the mayor has made this year has been run through the model to see what impact, long-term and short-term impact, it will have on future decisions. Needless to say, the $306 million of ARP funding that the city has been allocated in federal dollars has helped move the budget and make the budget decisions much easier. But because the mayor has taken a long-term approach, the decision has been made to spread the funding over a multi-year period. We plan on using $141.3 million to help balance the fiscal year 2022 budget, $51 million to balance this current year budget, and the balance to balance 2023 as we're still forecasting a deficit. This approach helps preserve many services as possible while weaning the city off the use of one-time money for ongoing obligations in the coming years. As for the city revenue forecast, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the general fund's 4 major revenue sources: property tax, sales tax, franchise fees, and transient occupancy tax. There is some good news as we see maybe the economy recovering slightly. Property tax forecast is approximately $670 million, an increase of $34 million over the current fiscal year projections. That's a result of a combination of a 4% growth as projected by the county assessor's office, plus an improved increase of 1.3% in the collection rate. Sales tax is projected to be $320 million in the coming year, a $37 million increase over the current year forecast. This represents a 13.2% increase over fiscal year 21 and is based upon trends and city sales tax based on the consultants that the city retains, who believes that federal stimulus checks will help boost spending and thus sales tax revenues. That's probably one of the brighter spots that we're seeing in our revenue stream. Franchise fee, another one of our major revenue sources, is $67 million, just a small increase of about $700,000 over the current fiscal year. Slight increase in gas and electricity use, but a decrease in the cable portion of the franchise fee. Perhaps the biggest wild card that we're facing is our forecast in our transient occupancy tax. Annually, we are projecting $181 million, of which $95.5 million is deposited directly into the general fund. While this is a 75% increase over the 2021 fiscal year projections, the total revenues are still approximately $100 million below the pre-pandemic projections. And while the state is planning on opening up the state's economy on June 15th, reopening conferences and conventions are not anticipated to begin until perhaps the fall of this year, and at much smaller levels. While we'll see some conferences coming in, attendance may be capped at about 5,000. So we're projecting a slow growth in that. We hope we're wrong, but that's going to drive a lot of future decisions. In conclusion, we believe this is a fiscally responsible budget, given what we believe we've all lived through this past year. However, what post-pandemic world will look like and when we'll feel safe that we have arrived at that level is still a big unknown. With that, I'd like to introduce Juan Pablo, who will have a few comments. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. So Super Cocina was started by my parents, Fernando and Amanda, who are here in attendance, and they're still very much here helping out with everything. But this restaurant was started 30 years ago. Since then, we have seen all kinds of recessions, economic downturns, and all kinds of different things that happened throughout the years. But nothing has ever been as disruptive as the pandemic. We had no way to prepare, and no president to look back to know how to deal with it. This grant was not only a lifeline to keep our struggling business alive, it was also a boost in morale, and that sometimes is not enough. It's not talked about enough, and that's something that can never completely be measured. We knew that it let us know that we were not alone, and there was always someone there that was really thinking about us as a business. It also allowed us to prepare and adjust to the new economic landscape. It is encouraging that the Mayor Gloria's administration places this much emphasis in assisting and stabilizing our local business. What caught my attention the most about this rollout was the creation of a concierge system, which will help bridge the policy to Main Street. It is often the case that the biggest barrier to assistance is bureaucracy. I can attest that I was tangled up in every kind of red tape when we were doing this process, and it wasn't easy. And sometimes you felt dumb asking questions. So it can be very confusing and frustrating, and especially for minority business owners. So I am very happy to see that, and just think of it as hopefully like your own Jeeps who kind of guides you through the system, which can be very, very, very tough at times. I would strongly ask and suggest and encourage all San Diego businesses to really seek out these programs. They are a benefit to you, and they can really make a big difference and a big change. Because in the end, healthy business community is important for a healthy community as a whole. We are at the heart of many of these neighborhoods. So finally, my hope is that we pass along the word in order to reach as many effective businesses as possible. If you speak different languages, please reach out to them as well and let them know that there is a helping hand now and that it's not as hard as it might seem, and it can make the world of a difference. So very happy to be here, very honored, and happy. Like I said, my parents and my family, we've struggled through this pandemic, but it is through these kinds of assistance that we have been able to survive. So I want to thank the administration and all of you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan Pablo, and the entire Sanchez family, again, for letting us use your space here. Some of you may know, until a couple years ago, I lived on Wilson Avenue, just here around the corner. I can't imagine City Heights without Super Cocina. And thanks to your hard work, ingenuity, commitment, coupled with some help from the city, we're able to make sure that Super Cocina will continue to be here. This budget is intended to make sure that there's more stories like that, because every neighborhood has a Super Cocina. Every neighborhood has a Sanchez family who has given out their life's work to make sure their business can survive. This budget programs over $10 million of city funding, We're working actively with nonprofit partners to put more dollars into this to make sure more businesses can survive. This is a part of getting San Diegans back to work. I want to wrap up with maybe 2 quick observations. Number one is that in a multi-billion-dollar budget takes a lot of work. And while I get a lot of the credit or a lot of the attention or a lot of the blame, the people that do the work are our Department of Finance team. And so to the individuals you see behind me, everyone, Matt Vetsby, Rolando, Adrian, Jessica, the entire Department of Finance team who are busy at their computers with spreadsheets and formulas and whatnot, you have our appreciation for the hard work that you do that is often unsung, but absolutely critical for this city, this 8th largest city in the United States to work. So thank you, and please take back my appreciation to all of them. And the last thing, our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Goldstone, got to this a little bit, but it needs to be repeated over and over again. If President Biden ever can hear my voice, sir, thank you so much for your support and passage and leadership of the American Rescue Plan. The budget that we're able to propose today has very modest cuts and actually has some one-time plus-ups to match the current circumstance we find ourselves in. Without the over $300 million that President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the Congress has sent to cities like ours, we'd be in a position of decimating neighborhood services, of laying off city employees, of asking folks to take pay cuts, asking them to take pay cuts after they have spent the last year doing what it takes to knock down this pandemic. So to the President, to those members of Congress, from this mayor, eternal gratitude for making sure that I don't have to tell businesses like Super Cocina that we can't help you right now, that there's no place for you, that we're actually adding to the rolls of unemployment. The American Rescue Plan prevents that from having to happen this year. And as you heard from the Chief Operating Officer, we can use those dollars this year and the next 2 fiscal years to make sure that we get through these difficult times. So again, deep appreciation to our federal partners and to Congress members, Scott Peters, Sarah Jacobs, Mike Levin, and Juan Vargas, as well as our Senators Feinstein and Padilla. We definitely appreciate your partnership and your support. The last thing I want to amplify what our council member, our chair of our budget committee said, this is the first in a lengthy process. This will go on for several weeks, several months, as we vet this, as we solicit public input, feedback, what you like, what you don't like. You got to pay for what you want more of. You can help us identify what else we can spend on what you want to cut. But working closely with the council president and the members of the council, we will deliver San Diego a balanced, on-time budget that you can assure will put San Diegans back to work. They'll get San Diego back on its fiscal path of discipline and appropriate budgeting processes, and really envisions a future of a city that works for all of us, a city that's a big city, and one that acts like it. So thank you very much for letting me share those thoughts with you. Thank you to the members of the team who are here today. Happy to answer some questions here or do them one-on-one, whatever you prefer in this COVID pandemic environment. Anybody? I knew Bowen would have something. Yes, sir.
The city has cut the police overtime budget in the past, only to see the department actually spend beyond what was allocated to them in the budget. What are you going to do to make sure that the police actually stick to these cuts, that the $4 million that you're trimming from their overtime budget?
So the question was about police overtime. There's about a $4 million reduction proposed in the proposed budget. We'll see what the adopted budget has. I've worked closely with our police chief to make sure that this is a reasonable cut, one that will not harm public safety or officer safety, and is actually practical and implementable. My responsibility as mayor to manage the organization, to hold department directors accountable for delivering on their budgets. But by working with the police department in advance of making this budget proposal, I'm confident that we can hit these marks, and we'll manage to make sure that's the case. It's critical for balancing the budget. Who else? Anyone else? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you. Okay. Okay, I think I may have got it. I'm not a 29-year-old council member anymore. It's getting a little harder to hear and more difficult to see in the mask, right? I think you're asking about prior administrations and the work on homelessness and how you connect individuals who are on the street with actual housing. Okay. That's why I'm the mayor. Okay. I can run a city too, everybody. So it's a very important question. My observation is a couple things. One is that we're spending more than we ever have on this problem, and yet most San Diegans don't feel like it's getting better. They think it's getting worse. And so we have to work to change that. Some of my comments are intended to address that. Well, first thing is that I think that we have to follow national best practices. The days of buying bankrupted indoor skydiving facilities for homelessness but doesn't house anybody, those days are over. And we're instead choosing to focus our dollars, our limited resources, in the places that we know are proven to get people off the streets. And we're doing this through a lens of compassion, of human dignity, and of respect. You've seen the announcement about reforming the way we do cleanups, to lead with homeless outreach workers, to do it in a way that doesn't criminalize or to provide citations or direct trips to jail, but instead builds rapport. With the support of the council president, we've stood up the first citywide homelessness outreach team that is not law enforcement. This is with our folks, with people assisting the homeless, or PATH. This budget takes that already significant commitment and expands it more to give more workers in every council district for more hours of the day of the weeks, and each day of the week. So national best practices focused on housing first with a compassioning, dignity, and respect. I think that's what's different. And that's my hope, is that we'll have a different outcome, to your point. You've heard this before, but how are we doing different? I also want to put a shout out here, not necessarily reflected here, but we have the ARP, the American Rescue Plan. It will provide us over $20 million more for homelessness funds. That will be helpful. We were talking just yesterday with the County Board of Supervisors. They're going to make a major commitment in homelessness. I hope that our budgets can be cooperative and collaborative. We've long done housing. They've done services. I think that sort of barrier has got to go away. We got to all do what we can with the dollars that we have. But our goal is to drive down the number of on-street homeless. And we got to do it. It's amazing to me that in the middle of a pandemic, when people are worried about their own health, and in a recession, when people are worried about their finances, that homelessness is what I get asked the most about. And that's why we're making the $10 million commitment in this budget, and we're going to leverage them with state, federal, and county funds to try and do even more. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the homelessness.
Yeah.
With everything going on, why, and I'm not positive, why are not family members able to rent to their family members? If they're on the street, that means they can't afford for them to live with them. But they have rental properties. And why would they not be able to rent to their homeless family members?
So the question is, with homeless people on the streets, why are family members not renting to their homeless relatives?
Why are they not able to?
I'm not familiar with...
Is there something that stops you from being able to rent to family members if they're in the homeless program, Section 8 program, and all this stuff?
I'm not familiar with any prohibition on them being able to do that. If they're in the Section 8 program, there are some limitations to the number of people that can live in a particular unit, depending on the size of the unit. But it sounds like that would be a personal choice issue. I think you're getting to the observation that I have. I know that Councilmember Kate does. We need a lot more housing. Right? I mean, there's homelessness issues that are around mental health and substance abuse and behavioral health issues. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of folks that are homeless because they can't afford to live here. They can't find a place that their wages can match to. And so that's because of a scarcity. We are not building enough housing for our population growth that is our kids and our grandkids. I'm not talking about people coming from far away. I'm talking about our children. And we are going to hopefully in the next few weeks be able to unveil a series of housing reforms that will hopefully increase the amount of housing supply, not just at the top of the market, because if you got $1 million, you got plenty of options, right? I'm talking about housing for working and middle class people, all the folks who currently today look at what's available and says, I can't afford that, and all the folks who look at the programs that are offered and say, I make too much money for that. That missing middle is where we need to focus on, and my administration hopes to make some suggestions that the council could consider to try and address that. Maybe last question. I know you all stand on Blacktop, and it's lunchtime, and you're at Super Cocina. Mayor approved, let me just say. Mayor approved in terms of the food in there. Anyone last comments or questions? If not, again, oh, yes, sir. Yeah.
Can you speak about a little of the importance of the signing of the short-term vacation grant?
Sure. Well, actually, I'd like the council president to field that one if that's okay. She's the author of the legislation and knows it far better than I do. I just would say that when you look up leadership in the dictionary, this woman is going to be in there. That is an issue that no one was able to get resolved until council president took it on. She got it done. We signed it into law yesterday. Council president, you want to make a couple comments?
Sure. Thank you so much for asking that question. I think this ordinance that we passed is excellent. It's a collaboration, a cooperation among almost every single party involved, whether it's the citizens or those who There we go. Whether it's the citizens or those who own and rent these places, or the platforms that help people to advertise them. So what this will do is help with our housing situation, because there is a limit on whole home rentals. And those are the short-term rentals that no one lives in permanently. They're only rented for less than a month at a time. And so there will be a capitation on those. It will be 1% of the city's total residences without not counting Mission Beach. And that would be, at this time, about 5,400. In terms of Mission Beach, they have 60% of their whole home rentals, of their whole homes are rentals on short-term basis at this time. They asked us, the people in Mission Beach asked us to please reduce that to 30%. So we capitated Mission Beach to 30%. You have to remember, in all of this, we have many jurisdictions involved, like the Coastal Commission. So we have to follow all the rules and all the legislation to make sure that we're doing this appropriately, legally, fairly, and equitably. And so we intend to make all the administrative parts of it fit all of that. And I think everybody in the city is going to find a great sense of relief, because there's going to be enforcement of the regulations so that bad actors will no longer have a license. Those who owe a TOT tax will have to pay it. Right now, we could have as little as 10 to 20% that pay the TOT tax on their rentals. But once they're licensed and get their certificates, they'll have to pay their tax. So I think in many ways this is excellent for our city, and will help preserve housing and will help preserve tranquility in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thank you for being here. We'll have you take one-on-ones if anyone wants any, okay? Thank you, guys.